Hey there, welcome to the full crew. I'm your host, Mike Peel, and we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about tech policy, mostly in the case of drones, but also in general aviation. We're going to be covering this topic from all angles today, including the recent Part 108 NPRM drop. We're going to be discussing how America's at the crossroads between, innovation with drones and affordable or widely available Chinese products and all of the issues that come with that. And then we're also going to be talking about how regulation has impacted the pace of innovation, specifically with drones in the United States, rather greatly. And we've got some amazing guests to talk about these topics today. I'm going to start off with Sarah. Sarah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name's Sarah Nilsson. I am a crewed pilot since 1994, a lawyer licensed in Arizona since 2014, a professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University since 2015. I teach aviation law, global drone law, and advanced air mobility. I'm also a FAST team representative on Drone Pro and the author and co-author of 5 legal textbooks on aviation law and drone law and advanced air mobility.
Well, thank you for joining us, Sarah. Everybody's a first timer today, so we're absolutely happy to have you on for the first time. But longtime friends in the industry, Kenji is next. So Kenji, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. First off, I gotta say, Sarah, your CV is amazing. So I'm always impressed, and it's always good to see you as well. My name's Kenji Sugahara. I'm the director of the Oregon Department of Aviation, as well as the chair of the Emerging Aeronautics Committee for the National Association of State Aviation Officials. And I've been involved in drones for a very long time, including a lot of drone policy. I was on the Remote ID Aviation Rulemaking Committee, as well as the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee. I'm also one of the primaries on the Advanced Air Mobility Multi-State Collaborative, which is 35 states, as well as the Choctaw Nation, starting to come out with best practices and key considerations for advanced air mobility rollout.
Well, thank you for finally joining us, Kenji. I'm surprised we haven't had you on in the past, but happy to break the seal on that one. All right, finally, we have Jason.
Thank you so much, Michael. Good to meet you, Kenji, for the first time. Sarah, always wonderful working again with you. So I'm Jason Lorenzon. I'm assistant professor of aeronautics at Kent State. I head up the UAS program here. I'm also manned our crewed pilot as well, airline transport rated. I teach aviation law, security and policy here at Kent, as well as teach the multi-engine instructors. I also do practice law. I'm the only board certified specialist in Ohio done through the Florida bar. There's only 47 of us. And they kind of found out my love for drones. And a while ago, they put me on the certification committee. So I'm in charge of everything drone on the certification exam. So thank you. Great, wonderful being here with you.
Yeah, it looks like we got a fantastic faculty today. So thanks again, Jason, for joining us also. I just want to quickly thank our sponsors, Lattice Aerospace, Meadowlark, Aircraft, yep, Defend, Carasoft, Infinite Drones, and Whisper. Sorry, it was a little rough getting through that today because we have so many sponsors now. The list is getting longer, so thank you for supporting the show. Also, if anybody has questions in the audience, feel free to drop them in the chat on YouTube or LinkedIn. I will try to get to them as I can. First article is going to be from Sarah, and this is the news that everybody really has been looking at for at least the past couple weeks. Part 108 has dropped. So tell us a little bit about what's going on and what's in this article, Sarah.
So yes, I had to choose this article since I had read all 731 pages in 2 days. And I'm not sure if you know, but we put out a white paper with Autonomy Global just yesterday. And I had also written about it for the magazine. So Part 108, this is the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. In other words, now is the time for everybody to give their 2 cents worth and post on the Federal Register their comments. We have some interesting things in this BVLOS NPRM. We also have to note that there is now organizations that are going to be involved. not just remote pilots with 107 certs. So this is kind of an interesting twist. We also see permits and certificates, two different things that companies can apply for. Permits for smaller scale operators and certificates for larger ones. We also note that there is no pilot certificate, new pilot certificate in there. The existing Part 107 certs still apply, and then the introduction of some new characters in the companies, and the companies are now going to take responsibility and are going to be accountable to the FAA. And I was reading that and thought, well, that's kind of like, if I look at it from a lawyer perspective, and maybe Jason can share my opinion on this, when a company gets fined for FAA enforcement action for doing something wrong, the fines are higher than the individual fines typically. So I thought that having the company responsible would also maybe generate more fines in a larger amount. So I thought that was maybe why, I'm not sure. We go on to note that we have these flight coordinators, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. We also really are excited to see that you have Part 108 also extending to Class Gulf airspace, and you also have the requirement to monitor the ADS-B out so that you can see, or ADS-B in this case, so you can see ADS-B out transmitting traffic for deconfliction. So that was very interesting. And then we noted some stuff with 400-foot radius of a structure, and in that 400-foot above the structure, just like in 107. That was really cool. But we also saw the 450 feet if you need to maneuver temporarily to avoid a collision. I think that was very practical on the part of the MPRM. We saw population densities, and we're going to use something called Landscan, and 5 different category levels for how populated the area is, and based on that, you will receive your ability to fly per 108. Let's see, we also have this shielded area notice. The shielded area within 50 feet of certain infrastructure, which is really very practical, so that you can do, let's say, pipeline surveillance, or even railroads or power lines or things of that nature. And as long as you're within that 50 feet of that bridge or the pipeline or the railroad, etc., you're good. And so I like that that flexibility there. I'm going to talk a little bit about the flight coordinator, like I said, and the operations supervisor, 2 key positions that the FAA is going to require to take control of the making sure everything is done correctly and safely. I also like that there's the introduction of an SMS. In the crewed world, we use SMS for a lot of things, and now since last year, it's a requirement also for Part 135 operators. Now we're bringing it into the drone world. I think this is superb. With respect to the people working, I like that we have a 14-hour duty day, a max of a 50-hour work week. Although, Mike, I assume since you were in Europe just recently, their hours are a lot less than the 50-hour work week. I'm sure you saw that. We still work too hard in this country, I believe. We also have 8 different categories where these permits and certificates are going to be used for. Things like package delivery, agricultural ops, aerial surveying, civic interest, UA operations training, flight tests, demonstrations, and recreational operations. I like that these permits are good. Every 2 years need renewing, keeps people fresh and on their toes. Maybe the FAA will come up with some renewal training like the ALCs currently available on the FAST Team website. I did like the 3 weight limits. We got not just 55 pounds now, but 110 and 1320, which ties in nicely with the mosaic rule. So I think that's superb. How am I doing on time? I'm pretty good on that, right? I was just going to mention, yeah.
30 seconds.
Perfect. So I'll just mention briefly how excited I am for Part 146, because as a pilot of a crewed aircraft who flies routinely on the weekends, It would be nice if my ForeFlight app that I use for navigation and weather and things like that, maybe overlaid with Lance so that I could see if there were any drone activities out there from permits that were issued or airspace authorizations and things like that. So I'm hoping that 146 brings a lot of innovation from the techie companies that do all that on the background, and that's it.
All right, and I just public service announcement. This is the notice of proposed rulemaking. That means the cement is not dried yet, and you really should lend your opinion if you can. It does make an impact. You know, once the regulation is set, it is much harder to make a change if it's going to impact your business or future business. So please lend your voices if you have the opportunity and have time. Any voice will be counted. They have to listen. Even if they aggregate similar opinions, they will have to go through every comment. So I just had a quick question before I pass it over to Jason for a rebuttal. Where did the automated data service providers kind of fit into this paradigm? Seems interesting to me that, you know, we have Lance or whatever, like, what are they doing that's different? What type of data are they supposed to provide to make this whole BVLOS ecosystem work?
Yes. So these third-party services and providers of these services are going to be the first to approve services that support UTM, which is the unmanned traffic management, and then eventually to approve services that support what we call XTM, the extensible traffic management. The term XTM is used to refer to cooperative service environments, pretty much in general, and is comprised of UTM, AAM, etc. And the FAA broadly defines all these service providers, be it third-party service suppliers or services self-provided by the operators, as what you called automated data service providers. So they're a person or company who provides an automated data service using a distributed computational system to support or manage aircraft operations, promoting safety and efficiency of the operation. And they may or may not be directly involved in the aircraft operation, but would nonetheless support the operation before or during its flight. So that's pretty much from the NPRM itself. And while you were mentioning the NPRM, in case most people, I'm sure you know this, but after the comment period closes and 4 different teams at the FAA review these comments, they are required to either acknowledge them, change things in the final rule, or say why they're not going to. And all of that information will be then published in the final rule in the form of a preamble. And the preamble is usually several hundred pages. And then the actual rule itself is only maybe 100 or so. So the preamble is where all of this will be addressed by the FAA, all the comments people have made, why they're taken into account, why they're not, and things of that nature. So us lawyers, right, Jason, we like to read that preamble because it gives us the insight into the inner workings of the FAA's mind. So pretty cool stuff. Or geeks.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic part of the democratic process, right? And it shows some resiliency so that it's not just edict coming down from the mountain by experts, right? It's a conversation between the experts and the people practicing on the ground and with their own expertise. So, Jason, any rebuttal to what Sarah had said, or maybe you're in full agreement with everything that she noted?
Oh, I'm in 100% agreement, because at least now I think we're pushing the envelope, because part of my article, which I'll get into in a few minutes, was, you know, do we have the technology that pushes the regulations? Right now, I think we've been in an environment where the regulations push the technology, and yet I'm seeing so many wonderful things out there from some of the things I'm working with at the university level, some of my clients in industry who are doing so incredibly innovative ideas, and yet they're being stopped by the FAA in different parts of the FAA. My only rebuttal to Sarah is Part 108, it's wonderful, but there's a lot of people there that the FAA, and I know that the FAA is going after them because they're not fitting the current regulations that are in place right now. And they might be doing things that the FAA or somebody in the FAA would consider what's always the famous thing that they go after pilots for, careless or reckless but yet it's done on, experiments are done on private property. They're not done anywhere near a populated area. Do you think that Part 108 will start paving the way so we can see some of this innovation not go through all this red tape, or also too, not some of these drone operators who are doing wonderful stuff end up in some sort of civil penalty or a revocation of their certificate?
I think it's going to help, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a breaking in period because, like you said, we're trying to do things with 107 and sometimes maybe stretching the envelope a little. But I think this is once people understand when this final rule comes out and start complying, and it's my understanding the FAA is going to discontinue when they expire the current waivers and just go with BVLOS for everyone all around. I think people are going to, once they see the benefits of this and become compliant, I think it's going to alleviate a lot of that, like you said. But I'm working on the FAST team. I'm seeing also the people getting educated before they're getting sanctioned with fines and certification, revocation, or suspension. But you're probably seeing something a little bit more than that.
That's where I just want to ask that next question because, yeah, I'm seeing a little bit more of that where they're jumping depending on what the facts of the particular situation is. But do you think that we're going too fast with these regulations, that that there potentially be too many holes that the FAA can go and sanction a person or an operator?
I'd like to think the FAA is going to work with everyone to try and get this technology to come to its full bloom and actually work for our country. I feel like there's a push to not stifle technology, and there's also a very political push to have us, if not meet, exceed what they're doing in other countries as far as let's face it, the elephant in the room. We've got China flying autonomous passenger carrying drones essentially in their EHang. So, I mean, we are way, way, way behind that here in this country. So I think the FAA's got this push to not stifle technology, and I'm thinking that we might be pleasantly surprised in the future, especially with the new, executive orders that came out a few months ago. I'm hoping that will encourage everyone to kind of not, so long as you're not being completely careless and reckless. I mean, I understand that 9113 rule very well, but there's a line between careless and reckless and a cautious risk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Kenji's seen it too. Sometimes
Oh,
there appears to be like a double standard on like what appropriate data collection is and like what constitutes, safe flying. So
Yeah.
I have to say, like, just reading it, the categories were a lot clearer than I've seen from the FAA in the, I think now I'm up to 10 years of reading these things. Kenji, what's your thoughts
Sure.
on it?
I have a bunch of thoughts, so I always do. But I forgot to tell you, I'm also a lawyer, so you're outnumbered 3-1 on the lawyer.
Okay. I'll be careful with my
Yeah,
words, and
yeah.
I'll be
No,
held to account.
what was most fascinating to me on the NPRM was that they're getting rid of 107 BVLOS waivers, and that's huge. I mean, in the way that the rule's written, there's too much of a gap between 107 and 108, right? So if you want to conduct operations under 108, the requirements become infinitely more complex. And one of the things that is also interesting is if you read the NPRM, there is a prohibition on manual control of your drone. So if you as a 107 have a current drone that has manual control, that's not eligible for 108. So if you're a state agency, if you are a regular 107 pilot, you're going to have to buy completely new platforms to be able to comply with 108. That's in addition to the fact that with 108, for certain categories and above, you cannot use the FCC Part 15 compliant drones. That's your 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz drones. In essence, above category 2, you have to get a brand new C2 system on a different spectrum. So that was fairly interesting as well. Getting back to the Part 146 component, what's really interesting is the FAA has said, specifically in the NPRM and the preamble, that they have a data coverage gap under 400 feet, right? So there's going to need to be someone to step into that role. And we've been talking in the States, how can we start standing up digital infrastructure to support it? So ADSPs not only include UTM for strategic deconfliction, but also secondary surveillance, whether that be, and that also means, I know it's very particular in how the FAA sort of talks about secondary surveillance, but more or less other things like weather, other things like remote ID in, ADSB in, so other sensor sets as well. So that covers that. But I think getting back to my original point, there's too much of a gap between 107 and 108.
All right. So, but you feel like this is because of the categories and the fact that there's practically no overlap. For example, you were talking about the operator can't engage with the drone except for I think it was 2 instances. One to hit the return to home button and like an emergency change of altitude.
Correct.
So is
It's highly autonomous, highly autonomous. And then there's also limitations on, well, there was a big point that was also made about 108 heavy as well, which we were hoping for 107 above 55 pounds. There's also the constraints on just where you can operate with what. So you can tell that the rule was pushed by a lot of certain types of companies, delivery companies, which is a good thing. But at the same time, there's a lack of an ability, sort of that overlap between 107 and 108. It's a clear line. So say, for example, you have a DJI Mini, right? It's small. As soon as it goes beyond 300 feet, guess what? It's beyond visual line of sight. And it would have to fall under 108, and you can't use it because it doesn't meet the requirements of 108, whether that be the manual control or whether that be the C2 links over a category 2 population density. So there's too much.
it doesn't look like a small business owner is showing up with
No.
a DJI drone and doing a small BB-loss flight over a large construction
Field.
or
Yeah.
agricultural space. All right. Well, well, it's a notice of proposed rulemaking, so please lend your opinion to see if you can move the needle in favor of the operator for the individual small business owner. Lend your voice. I don't think we'll get to remote ID levels on this one, but it does help to have the feet moved on the pavement. So Sarah, any final words before we move on to the next article?
Just one thing, since you all mentioned the data gathering, as far as the NPRM repeats what we already have for other kind of categories of pilots, the non-usal of the ASRP program, the NASA report, what we used to call in the olden days, where you self-report to the NASA's program, the ASRS, Aviation Safety Reporting System, and how that wouldn't be used for punitive purposes to the pilots. So that was reiterated again in the NPRM. But I think that's all I got. And Kenji, very good comments on the practical side of it, since you're more on the practical side of it than I am. I'm very isolated in a legal office and a professor office, so I don't really go into that. But that was really a good point and very true.
Yeah. Sarah, quick thing for you. Did you also notice the data gathering that needs to be done by the manufacturer, which is very interesting?
Yeah.
That was very intrusive. And for some operations, that might pose a security risk as well.
Exactly. And I was thinking of that too. And also the need for cybersecurity on the part of the companies too. I thought that was very telling.
Yeah, only so many people can mount that budget, right? Jason, what
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question for both Kenji and Sarah. What I noticed really interesting in Part 1.8, Sarah, and you brought up the shielded area, which I thought was very interesting. A comment that started with ICAO, EASA's used it, and the Canadians have used it. Do you think Part 108 is an actual reaction to what's actually happening in Europe? Because I personally believe that Europe's not necessarily technologically further ahead than us, but more implementing it quicker. Electronic propulsion, what Pipistrel is doing. Beta's copying. I mean, Beta's really using what Pipistrel has, and having a chance to visit their factory several times this year in Italy was eye time what was going on there. We don't really have that here. And I don't know if there is that connection that the rest of the world's doing it, so we need to do it. So here's part 108.
Well, yeah, we need to keep up with the rest of the world. But back in I want to say 2020, maybe, when I was at a conference presenting on what global drone laws look like, since I've been writing the book on that since about 2017. New Zealand had a shielded operation at 100 feet that I mentioned to our FAA that we needed that. And that was back in, gosh, 2016, 2017. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's very much overlap, especially, I'm not sure if you're aware, the network, the new network of the 5 countries, CASA, New Zealand, UK, us, and Canada, and the new aircraft type certification document that was signed this year at the Paris Air Show. That just shows there's collaboration across all the major civil aviation authorities, and rightly so, because if it's working for them, why not adopt it here?
Yeah, and in 100% that although Sarah, you said the 100 feet, and we go at 50 feet, and that's one of the things that we talked about in the BV loss arc, right? It's like it should be 100 feet, and from a realistic operator point of view, 50 feet is not that much, especially if you have a fixed wing VTOL that's flying along infrastructure. It's not going to cut it because you need to have that margin of error. So my recommendation will definitely be increase that to 100 feet like we did in the BV arc, because we looked at the acceptable level of risk. And coming from the traditional aviation side, I can imagine, hey, if you're flying 100 feet away from infrastructure, unless you're doing inspections, you have bigger problems you need to worry about.
I agree. I totally 100% agree.
Well, I have thoughts, lots of them, but we have to move on. So I will spare you in the audience. So the next article is Jason, America's drone ecosystem at a crossroads. So we kind of touched on these topics, and actually everybody's article kind of coalesces around a couple central points here. So Jason, take it away. Tell us what this is about.
Yeah, thank you so much again. Well, the reason I picked this article is kind of twofold. One, again, this whole tension between technology and law. This is the first time in history, if we go back to the 1926 Air Commerce Act, technology was already in place, accidents were happening, Congress acted to standardize certification of pilots, certification of aircraft, but we had the technology. And it was flying. Then the 1958 FAA Act, we had the jet age. Jet was already developed, being implemented. Then the biggest reformation after that was in 2012, where the FAA Modernization Reform Act, Congress came to the FAA and to NASA and said, figure this stuff out. And here we are somewhat. I'm a lawyer, not a pilot, so I'm not good at math. So some 13 years later, and was that what Congress is intending, that taking that long? But this is a huge deal where is technology pushing the law or law pushing the technology? And this is the first time, this whole idea, and I like this article, drone ecosystem. How's this going to work? As a crewed pilot, flying my airplane around, I've encountered a drone at 8,000 feet. It shouldn't have been there. But again, how do we keep this safe? But we see with the change of administration and the executive order unleashing the American drone dominance, I think is really important because so much of the technology was coming out of one nation, and that's China. And in reaction to that, of course, too, there was an Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer back, I believe it was in 2019, in the either San Francisco or San Diego, who actually determined that a lot of that data was going back to China and what was happening with that. But we didn't really do much. And then now we're into a situation where who's actually building the drones here domestically? So this is the most coordinated effort yet to build our future ecosystem. But again, what I like about this article is there's a stick and a carrot. What are the regulatory restrictions? What are the mechanisms of government And then, of course, coupled with market building incentives. But it's interesting that we're talking too about Part 108, maybe being restrictive. Most of my clients in this area are very humble, very meager startups with not a lot of capital. So we'll have to see how this goes. But the different federal agencies and lawmakers working together want to build that secure. And of course, here's the key word: innovative. How do we get the U.S. drone industry so we're not relying on Chinese made platforms? Big thing there in the article was how the Department of Commerce launching what's called a Section 232 investigation. That's like, what's that foreign commerce coming in? What's that trade coming in? Is it a national security risk? Are we mitigating that? And of course, this is actually going on alongside with the Office of Information and Communication Technology rulemaking. And the big part too, and another part of it, is the National Defense Authorization Act of 2025. And of course, the big, beautiful, the $13.5 billion One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is giving the largest amount of investment in this industry. So we see all this going on. That's kind of like our little bit of the stick. Now we're getting to the carrot here in a second, and that carrot is who's being funded on this. Supply chain, right? Critical components, manufacturers here that are local in the United States, giving them the opportunity and the ability to build something. But again, we have to see again how the military procurement, because a lot of this is rooted, the National Defense Act. What about the smaller, the people who are working in agriculture? What about smaller drone delivery companies? We'll have to see how that. But the other side too of this article, that there's no real, it doesn't seem to be any transition period. We're over-reliant or heavily reliant on Chinese drones, and or without periods of not having any of these vehicles, along without any type of funding mechanism, could have our domestic alternatives unable to match price and in the short term. And I got a question this morning from one of my colleagues: what other type of American drone can I purchase that's $300 to $400? I don't know if anybody on this panel can answer that right now. But nevertheless, U.S. Regulators and manufacturers, again, we've been way too reliant on one single overseas supplier. But we have to come back now, and we see now the policy of the government that, again, here is the law now pushing the development of technology. And I think that's where we have to see how this historically, being lawyers, we're always precedential. Will this work? I don't know. It's always technology, then the law. This is now the law pushing technology. We'll have to see how this works out in the future. So that's my précis of the article. So thank you so much.
It's certainly a topic that hasn't gone away, and I think it will continue to be important, because there's a lot of times, especially I think people get drowned in like the LinkedIn noise and the unreality of that and the unrealistic expectations. In some ways, we're conflating technology capacity or the ability to understand or produce a single prototype of technology versus the ability to actually produce that technology at scale. So if you're asking for a $300 drone that can compete with what is manufactured in China, I could tell you the best thing I've seen is an FPV drone that was about $1,000 of components, and there was still only one Chinese part on it. And that was the closest they could get to getting it to that price, because if they swap that part out, it would balloon to $1,500 and not be useful. So I think there's an unrealistic expectation. That being said, you mentioned the word transfer period, and that's one of the things that's usually on either side of this issue an all or nothing proposition. And if you do feel like this is a national security issue at the level that you say it is, you have to be either willing to tell the American public that they're going to bear the brunt of a 10x increase in cost to produce that here, specifically in this country and no other country, or you have to scope that down to the most reasonable kind of sectors that need that level of security and supply chain security. And I don't see those discussions often. So, Kenji, any opinions here?
Of course, I do have an opinion on this.
I know you do.
Yeah,
waiting for it.
yeah. My perspective is you don't innovate by banning, right? So you compete on merit and really technology. If there's a compelling product out there, people will buy it. And I'll tell you of a company that does it right in the United States. It's FreeFly. FreeFly does a fantastic job. They're innovating.
The products are so good.
They are so
Yeah.
good, and they just had their open house the other day as well, and people were just raving about their products. So one of the most important things that we have to realize is we do not have the manufacturing capacity in the United States as of now to fill the need of all the commercial operators out there. We talk about NDAA, we talk about defense, but the majority of drone flights out there that are occurring today are by the small and medium-sized businesses that rely on DJI. You're talking about losing probably around 70% of the small businesses out there if there is a DJI ban that comes down. I have friends who are 100% on DJI and who lose pretty much all their business if a ban comes through. So what you have to look at is a framework where you do risk appropriate mitigations. So think about you don't want drones around any military installations, period, right? Whether they be, you want only folks who are authorized to be there, right? So that's where you institute bans for any type of drone except those that are there. And then if you, going back to the 108 NPRM, Part 74 was mentioned in there specifically, which is going to be, in essence, the 2209 program that has been long coming. So in essence, you're creating no-fly zones above critical infrastructure and make sure that happens across all platforms. So there's also the fact that the big elephant in the room is we know DJI. They produce most of the drones and they're great quality. And they've actually been asking to have the review done by the national security agencies. That has not happened yet, and hopefully that will happen soon, but we have not heard anything. So I think more than anything, it's just applying common sense, realistic mitigations to ensure that data is not sensitive data is not extraflate or sent to folks that we might not have our best interest in mind.
Yeah, you brought up the data security issue, but
Yeah.
like that's not the only issue that I think that people who take the opposite stance to what you're taking have. But they tend to, in their conversations, especially the LinkedIn version of it, blend the two issues. But they really are separate concerns, right?
Yeah,
Data security ultimately comes down to the business or the individual.
Yeah.
Because if that person could get that data onto a phone, it's on the internet and it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But there's also categories though. So like the question becomes when you talk about, let's say, all right, everybody knows where the military should be on this,
Yeah.
but what about the public safety person? So, or, officer, fireman or woman. So in that case, I've seen things like North Dakota, they have an exchange program.
Yeah.
Like but a lot of states don't do that. They're doing outright bans. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah, is that sensitive data that they're gathering? Really? A car crash scene or a DFR program that goes out to 911 calls? Is that data that is nationally security sensitive? I don't think so. Again, it's that risk appropriate mitigations. Is there stuff that's already gathered through satellite? I mean, the satellite technology that the Chinese have is freaking amazing. So is it available like Google Maps as well? So we have to look at it in context of what data is available already. If you do a Google search, is it going to appear? So you just really have to think through things through that lens rather than a pure national security, everything's bad lens.
Yeah, I mean, a good example would be like a bridge scan by Google Maps, right? So that would be the same thing as the data a drone would collect. I guess you could argue a higher resolution, but I mean, people know how bridges work. So if they really want to do damage, you have larger concerns too. But yeah, not to say the concerns should be dismissed. I mean, there's a lot to data security that I think the conversation needs to be had rationally and addressed. So, Sarah, what are your opinion on this?
I'm going to go with Kenji on this one. I know that there's a lot of data that's out there already via satellite. And if it's already out there, then banning a drone that's going to collect the same data is kind of ridiculous, in my opinion.
What about tactical operations? I mean, I have an argument against this, but this is one of the arguments I've seen. So like troop formations for police officers as they address like a SWAT situation.
It's going to be on the news anyway. Don't we have freedom
It's going to be in a
press?
manual. It's in the manual. But
There
yeah,
you
no. Yeah. But I mean, there's a third argument, which I do think actually holds here, is what if we do have a global conflict with this adversarial nation, then you don't have access to these tools all of a sudden. I think this is the real concern to have.
That is the argument. If you're dependent on them and their supply chain stops because of some kind of conflict, then that is crucial. And that was probably my only argument for making it made in the USA. The non-reliance on other countries mainly for that purpose. My other half, because the lawyers, we got two sides of the coin, so we're supposed to argue both sides. So my other side of that is, do we really want a conflict with someone like China? I mean, do we? And honestly, do we want that kind of conflict? Do we not want to resolve it diplomatically first? I mean, isn't the world supposed to forget about Ukraine for a minute, but aren't we supposed to be a globe? We're all in this together. This should be what our focus is on in this 2025. We're trying to do this to save our planet from all manner of environmental problems, wildfires, tsunamis, you name it. And shouldn't we all be working together and not creating a conflict? And sometimes for conflict's sake, I mean, but I'm not a politician, thank goodness.
Well, I think the issue is that there's politicians that don't think like that. So we as good behavior for protection for ourselves, we do have to, I guess, contemplate scenarios of this nature and defend against the worst case scenario while being open to the best case scenario. So it's great to have the discussion, though. I just want to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. Actually, Jason, final words on this, and then I'll thank our sponsors.
Yeah, I think the comments here, I just want to go back to something, Kenji, that you said, and it's something I have a real big bugaboo with FAA. And every time they come up with drones and UASs, they say public acceptance. I've asked the question, what does public acceptance mean? And I've asked the FAA directly. I've asked NASA this in Columbus, Ohio. I said, has anybody discussed consumer demand? And the answer was, it's not their job. That was the straight out answer. And I think, Kenji, you said something that hit the nail on the head, that you can't have innovation if you're going to stifle that demand. And I think that's key here. And that's where DJI has a demand. They're putting a product that has a demand. And that's something that we have to consider, notwithstanding all the other national security issues and the over-reliance. But I think that huge thing is the nail on the head is consumer demand. That's my last thought. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. One final thought on NDAA. You can build the drone controller and the screen can still come from China and it's NDAA compliant. So things to think about. So there's definitely the environment for this needs continued discussion. I don't think we've quite worked it out perfectly yet. So just a quick thank you to our sponsors: Infinite Drones, Gladys Aerospace, Defend Solutions, Meadowlark Aircraft, Carasoft, and Whisper. So thank you for making this show possible. We're really proud to have so many sponsors. I remember when we only had one. So moving on to the final article. So Kenji, it's your floor. The elephant in aerospace: how outdated approaches ground America's aviation leadership. All these articles have been flowing greatly into each other. So thank you all for hitting all sides of the issue.
No, this was a great article that Mark Bathrick put out. And if you don't know Mark Bathrick, he was the head of aviation for DOI, Department of Interior, and he always
Yep.
comes up with great information. And I actually read this article before 108 came out, so I was sitting there like, there's a problem in the airspace right now, right? Because you think about it, not everybody is electronically conspicuous. And for those who don't know that, what that means is not every traditional aircraft has ADS-B out because it's only required in the mode CVL. So you have a lot of aircraft out there. So you think about lighter than air aircraft, you think ultralights, you think old planes without electrical systems. And so there's an issue. And Mark talks about that and says, as we go into an environment where things are more automated, things are more electronic, there's a big problem with the lack of being able to see these aircraft, right? Where there's areas without FAA surveillance radar to pick up on these, what do you do? So he's recommending that, hey, people should be electronically conspicuous. All the drones have to be electronically conspicuous. We have remote ID. So to really push innovation, everybody has to be participatory. And I think there was a great overlap or segue into Part 108, which says, yeah, you have to be electronically conspicuous, otherwise you have to give right away, which was a very, very interesting dynamic and a big change, right? Because that changes everything, puts everything on its head. Because previously, under Part 107, you had to see and avoid, right? So the movement to saying everybody has to be conspicuous is a good thing, not only for UA to UA, but also between manned aircraft and manned aircraft. Because hey, the Mark 1 eyeball is not as good as everybody thinks. You still have GA accidents all the time. You have NMAX. You actually have collisions that do happen. So just making sure that everybody has it, and to allow not just ADS-B out, but also have a lighter weight version that could be handheld and TSO at a very low cost that could have a battery installed. That's going to change the game because especially for these folks without electrical systems, you'd think the hot air balloons. When there was a big listening session after the BVLOS ARC, the lighter than air folks were saying, give us something because we don't want drones crashing into us. We don't either, right? Coming from the drone side. So if you can be electronically conspicuous, that's good for everybody. It's also good for, well, one of the biggest concerns that I've known about is the traditional aircraft side. The GA folks were like, I don't want to have ADS-B out because it's going to rat on me, or I land in an airport, they're going to be able to charge me landing fees. So it's pretty interesting. Things that you don't think about as a drone person or somebody that's not part of the traditional aviation community. So that was the biggest concern. So that's why in the NPRM, they talk about sort of the minimal data set for ADS-B like out, which in essence is anonymized data, but still it makes you electronically conspicuous. So those problems are overcome at a much more inexpensive price point. So that's pretty much it, right? So participating, getting your data out there so drones can avoid you. That's the main focus that the article went into, and I embellished with my own thoughts too.
Sarah, what do you think?
So yeah, I have ADS-B out on my Piper Cherokee. And yeah, sometimes you can avoid those fees if you just buy some fuel. I mean, that's sometimes a solution for me. Regarding the need to equip with battery-powered ADS-B out, yeah, I thought it was available. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can, yeah, it's a few $100, but you can equip yourself with that if it was to become mandatory for hot air balloons or paramotors, that kind of thing, experimental aircraft. I have one other thing that I want to bring up, and then I promise I've got no more opinions. The need to have a UTM framework that bridges between us crewed pilots who are on voice comm and a drone, let's say, that is on lands where it's all digitized. Where is that bridge and when is it going to happen? It would be nice if we could all see each other instead of working in our own silos. I'm in my silo with my ADS-B and I'm seeing my people, they're seeing me. The drones are in their little silo with the LANs and remote ID and all of that technology to be able to see them. Where are they going to overlap? And that's where I'm going to stop talking.
So is that the ADSPs from the Part
Perhaps.
108?
I'm hoping that there will be some crossover bridge, yes.
I'm curious if there's like an actual money model for that. It seems like it's like market, please solve this problem. Anybody else get that gut feeling or
Yeah. It's Sarah, here's the thing. Do you think it would be more appropriate in a terminal area? Because I think that's where you have the highest error risk to consider that. Because
For sure.
the other component is you really don't want to overwhelm the pilot. And the conversations that we've had at the state level is that, like, for example, ATC doesn't want to see it. They're like, I don't want it. And then you talk about airline transport pilots, and Jason, let me know if I'm wrong. You don't want to see extraneous information, especially
True.
final.
True, but at the same time, if you could limit that to altitudes, then you wouldn't have that problem. I could
yeah,
be
why can't you
flying
layer it?
my, what's that?
Or I said, why can't it be layered or why can't there
It is
be
layered, and also like Kenji said, in class Bravo or Charlie or even Delta. I'm just talking because I'm in Delta up here at Prescott, and it's very busy. We don't want all that interference. However, if it were layered, if I'm flying at 17,000 feet, I really could care less if there's a drone at 400 feet AGL. But if I am a GA pilot and I'm on a route head and I'm low, I'm maybe 4,000 AGL, and the terrain is such that there might be something in my area because we're very mountainous here, then I would maybe want to know. But not having the option, just like on ForeFlight, where you can choose the little layers of what you want on your chart. You want the IFR routes? Do you not? Do you want to keep it to this or that layering? Maybe we'd like a layer, and maybe that would be a good option so that you could filter it out if you're up at 35,000 feet in your southwest and you could care less what's down at 400. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking in terms of the future, because I'm also thinking in terms of there are drones and then there are eVTOLs flying and then there's me and then there's me going higher and then there's, me if I'm in a jet going above that, I'm thinking of the future. It's a shared airspace. We need to be able to coexist in it.
Yeah, we actually have a shout out from Mark Ganung. Before you mentioned it, he said ForeFlight exclamation point. So seems like there's a paradigm there that should be transferable. Jason, what are your thoughts?
So I think going back to Kenji's comments, which are good because pilots, one of my oldest daughter is an airline pilot. Yeah, they don't want any extraneous information. And I get that because it could clutter up the system really, really well. And some of the travels I do between the Cleveland Akron area down to Columbus, I'll fly down there and I'll watch what's on my ADS-B, what I'm receiving from other aircraft. And I know that there's a limit between 3,000 feet, but it doesn't really pick up anything, which, that's the limitation of ADS-B under 1,000 feet. Hence why what happened in DCA a few months ago, the tragic accident there, really showed the failure of ADS-B and TCAS and a bunch of other things at the low-level airspace. But I think we also have to go back to one concept that I find really amazing, and it didn't hit me until our safety manager here at Kent State took me aside one day. And I think the biggest proponents of opposition to drones are actually aircraft pilots, crewed aircraft pilots, because and I didn't understand why, because I fly both and do risk management, do all of that. But one of the comments I received, and I thought it was really valid, when something goes wrong and I'm on my plane, you got the wing outside there, I'm on it. I'm gliding it I'm doing whatever, the emergency procedures, I'm gliding it to the ground, but I am on it. I have a vested interest. If there is a vehicle that's autonomous and something goes wrong, where's that vested interest? Because there isn't that person who's flying it on board. And I think that's still a very simplified idea, but I think that's something that needs to be addressed as we move on, especially when we coexist. And the other thing too is we're still talking, what airspace we're talking about, under 400 feet. As drones get more complex and these operations become more complex and bigger, we're going to probably see that swatch of airspace. The stuff I've been doing here in Ohio, we're defining low level airspace, anything under 6,000 feet. So what does that look like? So these are things that we're going to have to decide and figure out in the future. And the last thing is, has there been any discussion in anything that we've talked about today, our Part 108 of the digital flight rules? I'll just leave it at that.
So, Jason, quick thing before we get to the digital flight rules component. I think some of the things that you're talking about, there is like the risk market, right? So you look at insurance. A lot of that will be covered by the insurance market,
Yeah.
which is fairly interesting, which is left out of a lot of conversations that we have with the FAA.
Yeah.
The FAA doesn't like it, but insurance is really the shadow regulator, right? So they will have something to say.
All comes down to tort.
There's our consumer demand, Kenji, right there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. But
final thoughts, Kenji, because we got to get moving.
No, that's good. I had something else to say, but I forgot.
All right, sorry I cut you off. I just want to thank everybody for participating today, the audience for tuning in, our wonderful guests, and the articles that they brought, as well as our sponsors, Defense Solutions, Lattice Aerospace, Whisper, Meadowlark Aircraft, Carasoft, and Infinite Drones, and I got them all this time. All right, so Dawn has got a great episode coming up with Charlton Evans and Tony Dirks tomorrow. Charlton actually, prior to this, holds the record, or actually prior to our last episode, held the record for our most viewed episode of Dawn of Autonomy. I want to thank Mark for participating in the chat. He said, that's a deeper conversation, so I'm going to leave that for another thing. And okay, so Dawn, I think that's everything. Thank you again to our speakers for joining us today. We are out here.